Take a look at this chart. It shows us what happens when a currency collapses. Between 2015 and 2025, the Turkish lira fell by 94% against the US dollar. In Argentina, the story is even more extreme. The peso crashed by 99% relative to the US dollar. The Turkish and Argentinian populations lost all of their purchasing power by holding their local currencies. Bitcoin, however, acted like a life raft. This is what Bitcoin's chart looks like priced in lira. It rose 650,000% since 2015. And this
An XRP rose even more, baby.
is what it looks like in pesos. It rose by over 5 million%. Now, what if I told you that the US dollar currency was also facing significant risks today? In just the past 100 days, the US dollar index has fallen by more than 8%. Since Bitcoin was born in 2009, this kind of move on the US dollar has only happened 5 times. But unlike past declines, this recent drop in the dollar feels different and potentially more serious. It's not just another short-term correction or reaction to temporary market noise. This time, it's happening alongside deeper structural concerns, like rising debt, geopolitical tensions, and growing distrust in the US financial system. In a world where the dollar loses its dominance, Bitcoin could take on an entirely new role. Now, unless you've been off the grid, you might already have some idea of why this US dollar decline is different. And Trump is back in the spotlight, and he's made it very clear that he wants a weaker dollar.
He wants to crash the dollar.
Whether
Right, and Trump has actually said this multiple times, and I want to highlight a couple more recent news stories to kind of talk about how this is going to affect digital assets, because this is something that is going to play a huge part into the future price of XRP. And this awesome video that this creator made here talks mainly about Bitcoin, but XRP, I do believe, has an even larger role in this new financial system that is going to be described here. And so I just want to, kind of point out why both Vance and Trump's messaging towards Chair Powell has been so aggressive. And if you guys don't know, Chair Powell's, of course, the head of the Federal Reserve. He's the guy who's responsible for the decisions on rate cuts, aka money printing. And so this is what Vice President J.D. Vance was recently saying. He says, "I'd love to hear an argument for why Powell cut rates 50 points right before an election, but can't do it now while inflation is lower." Now, honestly, out of all of the points that have been made from Trump or Vance, I think this is probably the best one. Trump has been saying time and time again that Powell is behaving in a very political means. He's essentially making decisions based off of politics and not actually based off of what's best for the U.S. economy. And this point that Vance just made here is a very strong indication that that is potentially the case. Now, Powell can make any excuse in the book as to why he doesn't want to cut the rates, but the fact of the matter is, the US dollar actually needs to be weakened. It absolutely has to, or the deficit is going to continue to grow, and there is going to be record levels of debt added to the US economy, and that will result in a complete collapse of that system if it continues for too long, especially with these interest rates. I mean, look at it this way. You have a real estate business, and you, of course, have a mortgage on a large part of the properties that you're financing in order to scale up. Generally, you earn 6% a year on those properties as a cap rate, but now the Fed has decided to raise interest rates up to 6.25%, meaning you're losing money on all of your properties, right? You're losing potentially, depending on the scale of your business, millions and millions of dollars every single year. If that continues, you're going to run out of all of your cash reserves, and sooner or later you're going to have to file for bankruptcy and sell all of your properties because you can't afford to pay them off. If this continues for 1 year or 2 years, you're essentially a fish out of water. And this is the actual real life case scenario that all different types of industries and businesses are in right now, because everybody leverages debt in order to make more money. If you can borrow money at a 2% or 3% interest rate, but then make 5, 6, 7, or maybe even 8% back on that money, it makes sense. But obviously when that gap is narrowed, and you also have all the risks of running a business, and of course all the fluctuations that come with running a business, like sometimes business is good, sometimes business is bad, it opens up a lot of room for you to be put into a really tough economic situation where you might have to liquidate assets or even close the doors to your business altogether. And the US government is going through precisely this at this moment right now. And if they don't print money and devalue the US dollar, well, guess what? They're going to be bankrupt, and then less and less people are going to want to do business with the United States of America, just as what happened with the Argentinian peso, the Turkish dollars, as we went over earlier in this video. So that's a broad overview of what's currently going on. And that's precisely why President Trump is saying Chair Jerome Powell is a very stupid person and attacking his character time and time again. He realizes if something doesn't change very quickly, it's game over for the Republican Party because, somebody who was appointed by the Democratic Party is essentially going to completely jeopardize him and his power that he has. See, Jerome Powell has a lot of power right now in this situation, and he likely knows that. I mean, how could you get to a position that he's in right now without realizing that? He has the ability to completely jeopardize the entire Republican Party. And whether or not he does that, we will see. But that is essentially the situation that we're in right now. And just to kind of support what I'm talking about, I want to show you guys the actual deficit that we just got in May. The U.S. Treasury posted a $316 billion budget deficit in May, the third largest on record. And this comes as total government outlays rose 3% from year over year to $687 billion. And while tariff revenue obviously surged 270% to a record $23 billion, it barely made a dent in this $316 billion deficit. In the first 8 months of fiscal year 2025, the budget gap now stands at $1.37 trillion. This is the third largest in history, and the 12-month federal deficit now stands at $2.0 trillion, or 6.7% of GDP, up from 6.1% a year ago. The deficit spending crisis is worsening, and it shouldn't take a genius to figure out that if this trend continues, the U.S. government is going to be in serious hot water. So there are two options, right? You cut government spending dramatically, right? Which I do not think any administration wants to do because they want to spend a lot of money on defense and military and all that kind of stuff. They're probably not wanting to reduce that. In fact, they're raising it based off of recent bills, like the big, tremendous, beautiful spending bill. And option number two is to print a lot of money. Now, this is what governments generally do because it devalues a dollar and it makes it easier for you to finance debt. And then you can use all this new money that's circulating around to, help essentially lower and finance the debt and grow the bubble, right? That's essentially what you do. And when you're the world reserve currency, you have all the power in the world to do it. Because Europe, China, most other very developed, advanced economies in the world right now, they're doing precisely this right now. They're lowering their rates, lowering. Some European countries even have a big old fat 0% interest rate. And yes, I know what you're thinking. It is possible to have a negative interest rate. That is something that some countries during extreme situations actually do implement as well, which creates a very interesting environment as well. So with all of that being said, there's a crisis that needs to be addressed here. And so the question here is, what is the answer to said crisis, right? Now, for me personally, this is how I view the entire situation. You have a government who has time and time again misappropriated taxpayer dollars, has gone bankrupt, and every single time that they are going bankrupt, what do? Well, they print more money and devalue your savings in order to finance the debt, right? Nothing about that financial system seems like it's beneficial to me. That's my opinion. I look at that financial system and I think, wow, I am getting screwed at every single corner here. So what I would like to do is I would like to get into a different financial system where I don't need to worry about some central entity printing money and devaluing my currency. And, I would love to be in, some kind of industry that or financial system that actually benefits from money printing, right? Because if the value of the US dollar is going down due to all of this money printing, which we've seen over the last 100 years, the value of the US dollar has gone down, like 95%, right? That's insane. So if it continues to do that over the next 100 years, which it looks like it's going to actually expedite in terms of speed because there's no longer the gold standard, there's no longer anything backing the US dollar, and governments are printing more money, I would think if you want to preserve your wealth, you would probably want to find something different where you don't need to worry about money printing, right? Well, that's great. XRP. It can't just be minted in the trillions. like like the US dollar is. Bitcoin is another example. That's why a lot of these developing nations and developed nations are going towards it. That's why we see people in Turkey and Argentina, all across the Middle East, China, US, Europe, you name it, they're buying Bitcoin because they realize, wow, the current financial system set up by my government and these bankers does not suit me. It does not benefit me. It benefits them tremendously because they can refinance and print money and do all these things whenever they want. But we don't have the option to really take advantage of that with the fiat dollars anyways. Like, sure, we can buy stocks. If you're smart, you can buy great stocks during the right times and you can, get lots of gains. You could buy real estate to kind of protect yourself and rent that real estate out and make money. But that's not an option for everybody, right? Because not everyone has enough money to buy real estate. And depending where you are, it could cost multiple millions of dollars for a cap rate that barely even keeps up with inflation. And some markets in real estate are complete bubbles as well because of the debt situation that I just described to you guys. Developers, they can't afford to sell their properties for any cheaper than, a certain price point because they'll be losing money on it, which drives up the price of all assets because these guys have a monopoly on that industry. But nobody can really have a monopoly on Bitcoin or XRP. And so that's why it's a great asset class in my point of view anyways. And that's precisely why the US dollar, I believe, is about to completely change everything for XRP. Because the fact of the matter is, Trump is actively saying he needs to weaken the US dollar, meaning he needs to print, right? How does that make you guys feel if you're holding the US dollar? Well, not great. So find an alternative, right? Find an alternative. And there's many alternatives out there, and I'm not here to provide you guys financial advice. I'm just sharing my point of view. XRP to me is the most amazing alternative option. That is why I'm going all in when it comes to XRP and other great cryptocurrencies, which I think have a great chance of taking over the new financial world. So with that being said, I'm going to be trading XRP a lot in the next couple of days. There's going to be a lot of opportunities because we're currently at a very pivotal moment when it comes to even short-term swing trading. And so I'm looking for some really awesome entries right now. I want to make sure that all of you guys watching this video get access to my trades, which I make accessible to all of you guys completely for free, just so you can see how I've been taking advantage of these sort of volatile movements over the last 6 months. I've been absolutely killing it. So has many people in my community. Shout out to the Crypto Crusaders. So if you guys want to get in, it's free to join. All you have to do is sign up on one of my 2 partnered exchanges and deposit on those exchanges. And you get awesome benefits for doing that. BTCC has a huge deposit bonus. Bitunix has instant access, no VPN, no KYC, and certain discounts on trading fees, and then up to $8,000 in bonuses on top of all of that. So yeah, sign up, deposit, submit your email and exchange user ID. I'll email you guys access to the Discord and the Telegram. You can join both if you want. And I'll see you guys in there, where I post all my trades. Much love. Thank you for watching today, guys, and I'll see you all very soon. Peace out.